As Halloween rolls around, my social media feed fills with videos recommending The Witches of Eastwick to women who love witchy films. Last year, my partner bought me a 2-for-1 DVD with The Witches of Eastwick paired with Practical Magic. I adored Practical Magic, so I was excited to finally watch Eastwick. But as the film unfolded, my excitement quickly turned into disappointment. What shocked me the most was not how it failed to celebrate women, but how blatantly misogynistic and demeaning it was underneath the whimsical aesthetic. This film was written, directed, and edited and produced by men, adapted from a book that was also written by a man. And the cinematographer was, yep, a man, and it shows. The visuals are stunning, luscious gardens, quaint houses, and of course, the beautiful women at the centre of the story. But all of this artistry is wasted on a narrative built around the male gaze and thinly veiled harem fantasies. What could have been a story of female power and solidarity is instead reduced to a spectacle of women existing primarily for male desire. In my analysis, I aim to follow the story of the film. In the small town of Eastwick, 3 women, Alexandra, Jane, and Suki, are discontent with their mundane lives and lack of fulfilling relationships. One night, they casually fantasize about the quote-unquote perfect man. And soon after, the mysterious and charismatic Varel Dan Horn comes to town. Daryl seduces each woman in turn, awakening their latent magical powers, and the 3 form an intense bond with him. But their empowerment is short-lived. As Daryl's manipulations grow more sinister, the women realize they have been drawn into his game. Eventually, they band together to banish him. But the story frames their power as both dangerous and tied to his presence, leaving an ambiguous ending that undercuts the idea of true independence. At the start of this film, the first cast member to be credited is Jack Nicholson, even before the title of the film shows, which is what follows, and then the female leads. It is perfectly clear who is the main character of this movie. It's Daryl. I need to remind people that in 1996, Jack Nicholson once beat a prostitute so badly after he asked for her money that she has intermittent vision and believes her injuries are killing her. Alexandra, played by Cher, is a ceramicist and recent widow, raising her only daughter. Suki, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, is a local journalist with 6 daughters, abandoned by her husband. Jane is played by Susan Sarandon and is a music teacher who is divorced and unable to have children. On the surface, these roles suggest diversity in these women's lives, but in reality they conform neatly to patriarchal tropes. Each woman's identity is defined by her relationship to men, and their value is tethered to motherhood or lack thereof. Even their physical casting falls into the familiar male fantasy structure: the brunette, the blonde, and the redhead, a lineup of types rather than fully realised women. Jane's introductory scene has her sexually harassed by her superior called Walter in front of her class of students. He then proceeds to grab her buttocks and run his hand along it as he leaves. In the next scene, Walter harasses her again by winking at her and pursing his lips while he gives a speech. During the initial assault, he asks her if her divorce is final, making it clear to us that he only respects her boundaries if she is seen as another man's property. As the audience, we are meant to find glee in the fact that the women get back at him by cutting his speech short by wishing for a storm. This framing transforms serious harassment into a playful plot device, reinforcing patriarchal notions that a woman's power is only entertaining when contained and spectacular. It also doesn't hold him accountable for his actions at all. When the witches meet up later, Suki reveals that Walter has also made passes at her, but instead of speaking about how disgusting he is towards all women, including his wife, they divulge into speaking about how his wife is sex-crazed, and Alex speaks about how at least she is getting sex once a week, after calling him a Nazi. This framing reinforces patriarchal messaging. Women's discussions are still centered on men's sexuality and status, rather than critiquing systemic misogyny. Alex is saddened that she has to spend her Thursday nights with the other 2 women instead of being with a man, showing how women should value romantic love over platonic love and friendship. Almost self-aware, Alex then remarks, "Men are not the answer to everything," to which Jane responds, "Then why do we always end up talking about them?" This exchange exposes how deeply internalized patriarchy is. Even when the women gesture towards independence, their conversations and desires remain framed around men. It underscores how the film positions male attention as the ultimate measure of fulfillment, diminishing the potential feminist power of women's friendships. When we are first introduced to Daryl, he is snoring obnoxiously during one of Jane's quartet performances at the town hall. This behaviour should signal his disrespect and entitlement, yet Alex and Suki laugh, normalising his rudeness. When he finally awakens, he approaches the stage and cries "Brava!", Italian praise directed at a single female performer. While he briefly says "Bravi" to acknowledge the entire quartet, he immediately returns to the singular "Brava", singling out Jane. This moment illustrates how Daryl's attention is highly selective and gendered, reinforcing the film's pattern of centering male desire and positioning women's accomplishments primarily as fodder for male approval. When Alex meets Daryl one-on-one, we already know that he has brought her entire stock of female fertility-like statues from the local bric-a-brac shop. He demeans her work by calling them little booby dolls, while he sensually strokes her hand. The fact he bought her whole stock shows how he has financial power over her. It's overtly patriarchal control. He has money and she needs money. It is a disgusting display of opulence. He then invites her to lunch, which she silently acquiesces to. At the lunch, Daryl reduces women down to their biological functions: nature, birth, rebirth. This fallacious nonsense of the divine feminine and the divine masculine is pseudo-spiritual hogwash designed to make sure that we do not question the status quo of gender roles. He then frames marriages as the death of women, invoking a free love ideal that claims women are trapped by monogamy. But the film never interrogates the lived realities of women for whom marriage, despite its constraints, can offer economic stability and security, a reality that starkly contrasts with Daryl's abstract male-centric fantasy. In this way, the narrative conflates male desire and ideology with female liberation, erasing the complexity of women's lives and choices. Daryl proceeds to show Alex his mansion, overt in its decadence. Finally, he takes her to his bedroom, where he states he likes a little pussy after lunch. He then states he would love to fuck her. Notice who is the subject, him, and the object, her, in this sentence. Alex responds to him with insults, stating, "You are not even interesting enough to make me sick." Just before leaving the room, Daryl then asks her, "Who are you going home to?" insulting her life and making it clear that she has done nothing up until then that is worth anything and her life is entirely meaningless. This is textbook negging. He drives it further by stating that a woman is nothing more than a hole. Alex begins to cry under the weight of his aggression and then, disturbingly, kisses him, leading to a sex scene. All these kinds of so-called romantic encounters are deeply pernicious. They teach audiences that coercion and emotional manipulation and degradation can somehow transform into desire, and worse, as such dynamics still count as consensual sex. After Daryl conquers Alex, he heads over to Jane's house, where he makes her incredibly nervous and she is repeatedly apologising to him. He then mansplains to her how most witches that were murdered were actually midwives, which is true, at least according to American and European history. But when a disgusting man states this, it is to coerce her into having sex with him, not because he actually cares. After playing the violin in front of her, she is impressed, and then he states how her bowing technique sucks. Then, while stating she can actually improve if she tries, he raises her skirt, opens her legs, and places her cello between her legs. It's a sickening double entendre. Only once he has literally rearranged her body under his control does she play quote-unquote beautifully. Then, right on cue, she throws herself at him, and they have sex. This sequence is a textbook example of how patriarchal cinema eroticizes coercion. Women's talent and confidence are only unlocked through a man's belittlement, intrusion, and eventual sexual possession. The next day, Alex and Suki head to Daryl's mansion. Once there, Alex is surprised Jane is already there. She becomes jealous, but Daryl ignores them both and heads straight for Suki. He calls her a fertile creature, akin to how one would speak about livestock. Here we can really see the age gap between Nicholson and the female leads. He is 9 years older than Cher, 10 years older than Sarandon, and 21 years older than Pfeiffer. The power imbalance is written directly into the casting. They play a game of tennis that turns out to be magical, and after that they all end up in the pool, where Suki ends up kissing Daryl. After the four of them dance together, the women then lounge together while Daryl films them. By this point, they are locked into a polyamorous arrangement with him at the centre. This isn't female sexual liberation. It's the literal embodiment of the male harem fantasy, with women reduced to interchangeable types orbiting around a single man's desire. After Suki's boss Felicia, who I will analyse later, is brutally murdered by her husband, the women want to keep their distance from Daryl, but he constantly pesters them, and we get a cliché scene of the women laying around depressed and eating ice cream. Daryl weaponizes each of the woman's deepest fears against them. Jane, he ages, Alex he covers with snakes, and Suki is in incredible pain. Then each of the women are confirmed as being pregnant, their bodies commandeered by the narrative. At this point I have to ask, why do women still celebrate this film? It is unrelentingly vile towards its female leads. When Alex visits Daryl, it becomes unmistakably clear that his desire is not for their power, their creativity, or even their individuality. He simply wants a harem of compliant women, there to perform the domestic tasks expected of wives, with sex at the centre. The film dresses this up as supernatural fantasy, but is nothing more than patriarchal control repackaged as entertainment. Some people will argue that the women quote-unquote win in the end, as they banish him. But this is completely refuted when all you see is 3 women laying around like objects on his massive bed just a few scenes prior. That is the point. He got what he wanted. The film is about him, his sexual needs being catered for, his harem being created. Additionally, the film raises a massive issue with consent when they sleep with him while planning to banish him. They are not willingly sleeping with him. They are under threat of constant violence if they do not. He was able to violate them because he has already shown them that if they do not comply, he will commit violence against them. There is nothing here that is empowering to women. They are literally acting in self-defense, not in a position of power. In fact, they are only active after they have been violated first. He calls them ungrateful little bitches in the church, while banging on about how women are a natural mistake. This language is not only degrading, but chillingly consistent with real-world misogyny. And given Nicholson's own history of violence against women, it is not hard to see that the insult bleeding from his character into his off-screen reality. Nicholson probably ended up calling the prostitute he violently beat up a bitch too. Even after Daryl is banished, Jane admits that she misses him. That single line collapses any illusion of empowerment. The women's actions are not rooted in power or autonomy. They are simply acts of self-defense after repeated violations. And despite everything, they still carry his children. Abortion is never even mentioned. Instead, the film frames motherhood as their ultimate destiny, their so-called fulfillment. This reduces their worth to their biological function, reinforcing the patriarchal idea that a woman's true potential lies in reproduction, especially when their child is male. The final insult comes in the ending. Daryl still lingers, watching them through the television like some omnipresent Nova Daddy, surveying the children he has sired. Even in the supposed defeat, he remains present, dominant, and central. A chilling reminder that this was never a story about women's liberation, but about women orbiting around male power. One character worth pausing on is Felicia, the only woman in Eastwick who is immediately distrustful of Daryl. For mocking his name, she is punished with a broken leg, and her life quickly unravels. Felicia is religious, and it's significant that films like this often target religious women for ridicule or destruction. Why? Because such women are framed as prudish, resistant to sex, and therefore an obstacle to the free love ideology of the time, a movement that was sold to women as liberation, but in practice often meant more sexual access for men. Felicia becomes the stock character of the nagging shrew, lashing out at her doting husband, who eventually labels her hysterical. Her skepticism and resistance are not valid but pathologized, reducing the message that women who question male power or refuse to conform sexually deserve to be silenced and destroyed. She even states that she likes a good fuck, but that isn't what Daryl wants, and she was right. At one point, Felicia raises a legitimate concern. Pornography is being sold openly at the local convenience store where children can easily access it. But before she can finish her point, she begins violently vomiting. Not just anything, but cherry pits, the very fruit the witches are eating across town. The symbolism is clear. The film wants us to see Felicia as ridiculous, even grotesque, rather than as a woman raising a valid objection. Her portrayal only becomes more demeaning. She is shown rubbing her crotch and ranting that Daryl wants to sleep with her, painting her as unhinged and sexually delusional. But here's the crucial point. Felicia isn't actually wrong. She correctly identifies Daryl as a threat and speaks out against harmful dynamics in the town. For that, she is punished, ultimately murdered in cold blood by her husband with a fire poker. The film frames her death as a relief and funny, as though the annoying prude got what she deserved. But there is nothing funny or cathartic about this. Femicide is the leading cause of death for women under 40 worldwide. To present it as narrative justice is not only misogynistic, it trivializes a very real epidemic of violence against women. It is important to remember, a film that merely depicts sexism is not the same as a film that is critical of sexism. The Witches of Eastwick revels in misogyny while masquerading as satire. If a sexist man can watch this film and enjoy it, then the film has failed to challenge patriarchy in any meaningful way. At its core, the narrative never allows women's power to exist independently of Daryl. Every aspect of their magic, their desires, and even their friendships and stories are framed around him. Once he is banished, their magic simply disappears, as though their entire worth and vitality came through only his presence. It is not empowerment, it is reaffirmation of male centrality and control.